Chapter 1.4 Hello, Space. Retta left the cargo bay and entered the hall. It was bare. The entire ship was old, exposed metal, rusted at the edges, the bolts, and the hinges. The lights had a faint buzz. The metal flooring creaked. The ship clearly showed its age, but it hid its history. A ship this old didn't trek space without stories, but there were no memories, no souvenirs, no scars, no record, just like its enigmatic pilot. Its past was purposefully hidden, and that mysterious lure drew Retta deeper towards the pilot. She was halfway down the hall when Red heard the dog. Its paws scratched against the floor. It was coming towards her. Retta was too far to turn back and too close to danger. If she ran, it'd chase her. Retta looked down the hall, saw the edge of a door, and heard the dog approaching. I gotta risk it, she thought, and scurried forward. She slid through the door, into a bathroom, and heard the dog right outside. The dog skimmed the floor, trailing Retta's scent, getting closer and closer. Retta had precious seconds. Frantically, she looked for something, anything. She needed a distraction. She needed another treat. All she found at the sink was a bottle of whiskey next to the toothpaste. Scent. She's using scent. Retta uncorked the whiskey and dabbed it on her hands. She rubbed it down her arms, her legs, and bathed herself in the same nasty scent as the pilot. It burned her nostrils and brought tears to her eyes. The door moved. Retta froze, watched the hinges, and saw the dog's snout peek through the crack. It sniffed the floor once, twice, and caught the scent of whiskey. The dog scrunched its nose, knew the familiar smell, and backed away. It followed Retta's old scent, down the hall, and into the cargo bay. Retta exhaled with temporary relief. It was only a momentary victory. That dog would continue chasing her. She needed a better hideaway. The linear hallway led to the kitchen, if it could even be called that. It looked like a bear sacked it. The cabinets were swung open, garbage spilled out the can, and the fridge was wide open. There was a single rusted pan, a stack of dirty, crusted dishes, and an ungodly odor from the sink. It may have smelt toxic to Red, but fostered an entire colony of buzzing fruit flies. The connected den was equally depressing. There were towers of ripped and torn magazines, an old cloth sofa more akin to a quilt of colored stains, and a card table balanced by a stack of napkins underneath the legs. There was little doubt in Retta's mind the pilot was alone now. No other person in their right mind would live in these conditions. Down the hall, on the left side, light bled underneath a closed door. It must have been the pilot's room. Retta crept towards it and passed by unoccupied crew quarters. She thought about staying there. She doubted the pilot would notice. But Retta was her mother's daughter, and her curiosity always got the better of her. Past the pilot's room, at the hall's end, was the cockpit. It was empty, abandoned, and wide open for her to see. Retta dreamed of seeing a cockpit, sitting at the pilot's seat and holding the yoke in her hand. It was silly, but she couldn't help herself. She had to see it. Red passed by the pilot's room and immediately heard his door slide open. Her heart sank, and before she could blink an eye, a heavy hand gripped her throat and pinned her to the wall. A knife found its way precariously close to the fabric of her scarf. "Little girl stowaway," he said with his heavy drawl. "Hiding on my new ship, eh?" His alcohol-laden breath burned her nostrils, and his white stubble scratched her cheek. "You expect to be sneaking with that thread scarf? Are you dumb, girl?" He pricked his knife against Red's scarf, and she instinctively kneed him in the gut. Rancid breath expelled out his lungs, and he clutched at his stomach. Red scurried away, into an empty quarter, and hid behind a bed. The man was still hacking up a lung in the hallway. She needed a plan. Any plan. What did she know? What could she use? Why did he say his new ship? How could this rust bucket be considered new? It was an old freighter, and an unremarkably standard one at that. But everything around it was unstandard. Ships normally only docked one night. This ship stayed 2 weeks. The pilot was unknown and had no history. Was that true? Or did he hide his history? After all, he paid the guards. Retta realized it. The pilot was stealing this ship. He had to be. Had he reprogrammed the cameras? Is that why he spent so long in the dock? Am I even supposed to be on this ship with this pilot? Retta thought. Her mom's only message was to find the junk dog. This was the ship. But who was he? The man hobbled towards her, hunched over, gripping the doorframe. Hiding? Got no room for that. She hid herself in the looted clothes and bags strewn across the room. The man entered, and Retta held her breath. She watched his drawn shadow move through the room, deeper and deeper. Keep coming, she thought, with a glass bottle in her hand. Come on. Retta gripped the bottle tighter, and when he was deep enough, she threw the bottle against the opposite wall. The glass shattered and distracted the pilot. He turned, and Red vaulted over the bed, weaved past him, and turned the corner to the cockpit. Despite the abnormal circumstances, this was still a normal freighter, which meant there was a distress signal. Retta looked directly underneath the yoke. She found the red button exactly where she expected to. A bribe might distract guards, but distress signal would call stars. The man caught up and saw Retta at the yoke. Clever, he said from the hall, putting his hands in the air. All right, you got me. Let's talk it out. Talk? You want to talk it out? Retta's adrenaline was pumping. She wasn't ready to talk it out. Yeah, no need to press that button, the pilot said, keeping his distance from Red. The star signal was a clear threat. All right, Retta said, finger still ready on the distress signal. I need a ride off Earth. You take me off Earth? I don't call stars on your stolen ship. His eyes widened. Where off Earth? To the nearest planet. I'll find my way from there. You just running? I'm looking for someone. Retta was too cautious to say her mother's name yet, even if her message directed her here. She knew the criminals Celeste crossed in the past. She couldn't risk it if he'd been one of them. She needed to be careful. I'm looking for someone too, he said. My name's Tobias, by the way. Lil Red. You know my name? Huh? Nah, your scarf, he said, gesturing with a nod of the head. It's bright red. Right. Tell you what, Red. I need a ship hand. He eased up and let his hands fall to his sides. Retta didn't flinch. She still held the trump card. The pilot slipped his hands in his pockets and still waited at the door frame. You help me, and we could look for your someone along the way. Deal? Deal. All right, he said, and slowly walked towards her. She still kept her finger on the distress signal and her other hand on her knife. I'm gonna need that seat. He gestured to his chair. Can't fly with your finger under the yoke, unless you know how to fly. She paused and slowly backed away from the pilot's seat. By the way, he said and sat down, if you tail a target like me for 2 weeks, they're gonna notice, he said and locked eyes with her. Red as starlight. She was ready to draw her knife, until he added, but who you are stays between us. And he gave her a wink. Tobias whistled and paw steps rushed down the hall. When Retta turned back, a barreling white ball of fur crashed into her. It toppled her to the ground, and the white German shepherd licked her face up and down. You're lucky Alpha seems to like you, Tobias said, and then smelled the alcohol. It's probably 'cause you reek like me. He turned the ignition. The engines roared with force, and the ship rumbled to life. All the while, Alpha had Retta pinned, and she couldn't fight her off. Stop it, Retta said between her laughs. Stop licking me. Tobias sighed. I hope you're not allergic.